Okay, let's try and unpack this. It feels like we're watching uh, this high-stakes geopolitical chess game unfold while, well, the board itself is literally on fire.
Yeah, it's quite the contrast, isn't it?
Exactly. You've got this sudden burst of intense diplomacy.
Hmm.
I mean, really high-level meetings in Washington, calls between leaders, even serious talk of a summit.
All aimed at ending a war that's now nearly in its fourth year. It's staggering.
But, and this is the key thing, while all these words are flying back and forth, the actual fighting hasn't stopped. The rockets are still falling.
Mm-hmm.
So this deep dive, we really want to focus on analyzing that stark contrast. We're going to cut through some of the headline noise and look closely at the recent moves involving President Trump, President Putin, President Zelensky.
And we're using the insights from the sources you, the listener, shared with us.
Precisely.
Our goal today really is to give you a clearer picture of where things stand right now. What are the new demands? What about these, frankly, frustrating non-commitments from the West?
And how is all this shaping what looks like a very, very uncertain path towards peace?
And what's really striking, I think, and what the sources bring out, is this potential for a major shift in the U.S. position on territorial concessions. That's huge.
That's the core question, isn't it?
It is. The big picture really boils down to this. Is peace only achievable if Ukraine gives up territory? And just as important, what does this shifting American tone mean for Kyiv?
Kyiv, which has bet everything on resisting.
Exactly. And what does it mean for America's allies in Europe? It raises a lot of questions.
Okay, that's the perfect place to start, because if we're talking compromise, we have to begin with Moscow's price tag. And it's not vague, is it? It's surprisingly specific.
No, not at all.
Let's get into Section 1, the price of peace, focusing on these territorial concessions. The sources mention a reported phone call, Putin and Trump.
Right.
And Putin apparently made a very direct core demand. According to officials who were briefed, he essentially urged Ukraine to surrender the eastern region of Donetsk.
Yeah, and that really is the heart of the Russian stance. It's not new, maybe, but the directness in that call, as reported by the Washington Post, it just draws a hard line.
A non-negotiable line.
It seems that way. Moscow is saying quite explicitly, territorial concessions are the price for ending the war. And it's not just behind closed doors.
No.
Russian officials have been saying publicly, consistently, that for peace to happen, Ukraine has to formally recognize Russian control over all the territory they currently occupy.
Okay, and then connecting that to the U.S. side, this is where it gets really interesting, maybe even worrying for some. President Trump's interview with Maria Bartiromo on Fox.
He addressed this directly.
He did, and seemed to signal, well, a potential acceptance of Russia keeping some land. He used phrases that really jumped out.
They did. The specific quotes are important here. First, well, he's going to take something.
Yeah.
Talking about Putin.
Right, and then the second one, referring to Putin having won certain property.
Certain property. That phrase alone is, it's politically explosive, especially for European allies who've stood firm against recognizing annexed land.
So if you put those two things side by side, Putin demanding Donetsk, Trump suggesting Russia has won property.
You connect those dots, and it strongly suggests the U.S. administration is, at the very least, exploring a negotiated settlement that includes Ukrainian territorial compromise.
Which is a major departure.
A huge departure from the previous stated U.S. policy, which was always about Russia withdrawing completely.
But doesn't just signaling that kind of compromise that Russia might get to keep certain property, doesn't that just gut Kyiv's negotiating position before talks even begin?
Well, that's the fear.
Are we sort of handing Putin a win just by validating the idea that, you can take territory by force and then get it legitimized?
That is the absolute critical tension. And it's exactly what European diplomats are expressing deep concern about. By even hinting at recognizing Russia's gains, the U.S. potentially fractures that Western unity that defined the response for 3 years. It tells you, the listener, that maybe Washington's priority is shifting.
From Ukrainian sovereignty to just ending the war quickly.
Perhaps.
Yeah.
Regardless of the cost to Kyiv. It definitely changes the calculation for Zelensky dramatically.
These geopolitical pressures, they're shifting so fast.
Yeah.
And that pressure brought President Zelensky straight to Washington, like the day after that Trump-Putin call.
Right, which brings us neatly into Section 2, the Tomahawk negotiation and the reaction back in Kyiv.
And Zelensky wasn't just there for handshakes, was he? He was pushing for something very concrete, militarily crucial.
Tomahawk cruise missiles, long-range ones.
And he apparently came with a specific deal on the table, a kind of counteroffer.
Yes, the source material describes this almost like a transaction.
Yeah.
Kyiv would give the U.S. advanced drone tech, battlefield intelligence.
Things Ukraine excels at.
Exactly, their expertise, in exchange for these Tomahawks. And you have to grasp why Tomahawks are such a big deal.
Precision, long range.
Exactly. Precision-guided, they can fly hundreds of miles. It would be a game changer, allowing Ukraine to hit Russian logistics, command centers way behind the front lines, with an accuracy they just don't have right now at that range.
So Ukraine is offering its best innovation for desperately needed firepower. But Trump's response?
Non-committal, which, in diplomatic terms often means no, not now.
Right. He gave reasons, cited needing to keep U.S. stockpiles up. Standard stuff.
Standard military justification, yes. But the underlying message seemed clearer, and it lines up with that earlier talk about compromise.
The desire to just end the war.
Pretty much. He said, and this quote really captures the U.S. hesitation, we'd much rather have them not need Tomahawks. We'd much rather have the war be over, to be honest.
So no Tomahawks for now. The official readout called the meeting constructive.
Constructive, yes. But notice, no actual commitment to the missile sale. And that political no decision has immediate consequences, emotionally and militarily, on the ground in Ukraine.
Yeah, the contrast is stark. You have these constructive talks in D.C., and then you hear from people actually living through the war.
It's brutal.
The sources included a quote from a Ukrainian serviceman, Roman Vinichenko. He sounded, well, deeply skeptical.
Understandably so.
He said, Ukraine won't get those missiles. Every day, civilians and soldiers die, buildings collapse, our streets and cities are being destroyed. That just cuts right through the diplomatic language, doesn't it?
It really does. It's a raw reminder of the immediate human cost when strategic decisions or non-decisions are made in capitals far away. For that soldier, a delay means more lives lost today.
It highlights that huge gap between the pace of diplomacy and the kinetic reality of the fighting.
It does. Though, to be fair and balanced, we should also note Zelensky's own public response afterwards, talking to NBC News. He clung to a bit of optimism.
What did he say?
He specifically said, it's good that President Trump didn't say no, but for today didn't say yes. We keep talking.
Which tells you Kyiv's strategy, right? Keep the dialogue open, keep pushing, even if you leave empty-handed this time.
They have to. What other choice do they have? Even as things get more desperate militarily.
Which is tough. It's hard to focus on these high-level talks when the sounds of war are still so loud. And that takes us straight into Section 3. Military actions and this growing geopolitical polarization.
Right. Because the diplomacy isn't happening in a vacuum.
Not at all.
Putin's demand for Donetsk isn't just talk. It's backed by renewed Russian offensives in eastern Ukraine. Moscow actually claimed capturing 3 more villages near Donetsk just over the weekend.
Although Ukrainian officials dispute that.
They do. They insist Russian forces are mostly on the defensive. But either way, it shows both sides are actively trying to improve their positions on the ground, likely to strengthen their hand before any potential summit happens.
And Ukraine's not just sitting back. The sources mention a pretty significant Ukrainian counteraction, a drone strike.
A very strategic one. They hit a large gas processing facility way inside Russia in the Orenburg region, caused a huge fire, apparently disrupted operations significantly.
So that's not just a random attack.
No, absolutely not. Kyiv's goal seems clear. Degrade Russia's energy infrastructure. It's their way of hitting back economically, saying, if you push on the battlefield, we'll target the resources funding your war.
Using economic pressure to try and regain some leverage they might be losing diplomatically?
Precisely. It's all connected.
And this whole cycle, the fighting, the tentative diplomacy, it leads to very mixed reactions in Europe about this potential Trump-Putin summit in Budapest. It seems really polarized.
Deeply polarized.
Yeah.
It highlights a real rift within NATO and the EU.
On one side, you have someone like Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban.
Right. He welcomed the idea, called it great news for the peace-loving people of the world. He sees it as the only path to stop the fighting, pushing for quick diplomacy.
And then you have Brussels.
And many other EU capitals, yes. Serious warnings coming from EU diplomats. They're extremely worried.
Worried about what specifically?
About any deal that might inadvertently legitimize Russia's territorial gains. Their big fear is strategic. If a peace deal gets rushed through, maybe without full European buy-in, it could undermine the entire Western effort.
All the billions invested in Ukraine's sovereignty.
Exactly. And worse, It could set a dangerous global precedent that invading your neighbor can actually lead to you owning their land.
And that concern about undermining efforts extends to the economic front, too, right? The fight against sanctions evasion is still ongoing, regardless of peace talks.
Oh, absolutely. It's a constant battle. There's a key detail in the sources about this.
The shadow fleet.
Yes. The EU's diplomatic service, the EAR, is pushing member states hard to back tougher inspections on Russia's so-called shadow fleet of oil tankers.
Okay, what exactly is this shadow fleet for people who haven't followed this closely?
Basically, it's a collection of often older, poorly insured ships operating outside normal international maritime rules.
Sketchy ships.
It's very sketchy. They're used specifically to transport Russian oil secretly around the world, getting around G7 price caps and sanctions.
So Moscow uses these ships to hide where the oil came from, sell it above the capped price, and that money flows right back to fund the war.
That's the accusation, yes. The ES is explicit. Moscow is using these vessels to dodge sanctions and finance its military. They're saying, we have to close this loophole.
So even with peace talks potentially on the horizon, the economic warfare continues intensely.
Correct. It highlights that even if the U.S. and Russia start talking seriously about ending the fighting, the broader economic struggle trying to starve Putin's war machine of funds is still very much active, especially for the EU.
So wrapping this up, what does this all mean for you watching this unfold? The situation seems incredibly tangled.
It is extremely complex.
You've got Moscow sticking to its demand for Donetsk. You have the U.S. maybe signaling some flexibility on territory, which is huge. And at the same time, Kyiv is being denied crucial weapons like Tomahawks right now.
We're definitely in a moment of high volatility, high tension. The war looks set to grind through another winter.
Yeah.
And while U.S.-Russian diplomacy is sort of flickering back to life, tentatively, both sides are still applying maximum pressure, militarily and economically. It feels like they're testing whether words can finally achieve what weapons haven't, which is a decisive victory for either side.
But the fighting continues.
The fighting absolutely continues. Force is still the primary language being spoken, even as diplomats arrange meetings.
Which leaves us with a pretty stark final thought, doesn't it?
I think so. The negotiations seem to revolve around territory and weapons, yet the military escalation hasn't stopped. So the provocative question for you to consider is, what conditions beyond just agreeing on borders do you think would actually lead to a real end to the fighting?
Based on everything we've discussed, the military pressure, the tentative diplomacy.
Exactly. Is the real trigger going to be economic collapse, maybe total military exhaustion on one or both sides? Or does there need to be some kind of fundamental political change in Moscow or Kyiv before the guns truly fall silent?
That feels like the strategic puzzle the world is trying to solve right now.